feel like we've welcomed back the prodigal son, but apparently that's an inappropriate biblical reference according to Arthur. We're going to discuss his outstanding book, From Strength to Strength, which I have a lot to ask him about. But we're going to wait until our live stream audience, our webinar audience, can all be joined, and then I'll start formally. But I have to tell you, here, for those of us who are joining and for those of you who are here, it's really a great scene because we're here at AEI headquarters live, and lots of young people and people that knew Arthur and loved Arthur when he was president and when he roamed the halls here are down in the building with us, and they're here to show their affection and love for him, and that all that he built at AEI and that I, as the current president, am living off of in some way, and greatly, greatly appreciative. So we're glad to have you here. And I just can't wait to start asking questions about the book, but I'm waiting for that cue till we get all of our webinar audience in. Arthur, glad to have you.
Thank you, Robert. I had written books on the science, the brain science, and social science of happiness. I didn't understand the working out of it for other people until I came to this organization. And when I left, I thought, I'm going to get back into it, but using what I've learned from this place. So I teach a class at the Harvard Business School, and I read a column in the Atlantic called How to Build a Life, have a podcast, all the kind of stuff that you do in public intellectual life. What am I doing? I'm spreading the ideas of the American Enterprise Institute, the work that you are doing to build a country, to share these ideas with the world, that the free enterprise system sets people free, that we can be the masters of our own fate.
Well, hold on there, Arthur.
I'm on a roll, Robert. Come on here, man.
I know, and we've seen that roll, but the thing is that
Robert's like, I've seen that roll 100 times, yeah.
But no, it's important, Arthur, because the book is not about public policy. It's about the path of one's career, the path of a person my age, your age, who reaches a certain point and is deeply unhappy. They've devoted their life to strive, succeed. And you write that that's ultimately not fulfilling, and their abilities are diminishing. So you have these two curves of life, the fluid intelligence, which people at my age are beginning to lose.
No loss. Already
lost. That's right. And the crystallized intelligence, which is what we need to be focusing on going forward.
Right.
So the book is really about transitions, the transitions in a person's professional and personal life.
Right.
Could you just take us through those two curves of life and just describe to the audience what it is you're talking about?
Yeah. So the whole time that I was in your job, and subsequently, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of really successful people. And one of the things that you see is that it's interesting. We all believe that if we're successful early in life, that we can kind of bank those successes and get permanent satisfaction. That's what the world tells us, but that's what our neurobiology tells us that. We believe our brains tell us that hit the mark and you'll be okay. That's actually wrong. Your dreams are liars. You can't get satisfaction from worldly successes. You just can't. You can get momentary satisfaction. Mick Jagger sings, "I can't get no satisfaction." He's wrong. You can't keep no satisfaction, actually. And there's a lot of research behind this. The problem is that you get more successes early on in your life from
into your 40s, late
40s.
Before.
In your 20s and 30s, from being a striver, from working harder, all the stuff that we celebrate as part of the American enterprise system. Really great. The trouble is that the structure of the brain is such that, and this was not known until relatively recently, that ability to solve problems faster, to innovate more, that declines precipitously starting in the late 30s and all the way through the 40s. And most people who are real strivers, one of the sources of frustration and disappointment about their lives is wishing that they could do those things that they can't anymore. I remember when my son Carlos, when he was 11 years old, he started beating me in checkers. I was president of AEI. How can that punk, he was barely making it through his math classes, and he was, it's okay, I'm proud of him now.
But Arthur, in the book, you take us through great scientists, great artists, great musicians.
I get no joke time?
But you take us through, then you talk about these diminishing skills.
Yes, that's the first curve.
That's the first curve.
That's the first curve.
Your thesis is that by 45, 46, early 50s, depends.
Your first set of abilities have declined.
But if we keep trying to succeed using those abilities, we will ultimately be frustrated, and as the character you describe in the airplane, deeply unhappy, wishing you were dead.
or some analog thereof.
Okay.
There'll be something where you're raging against the dying of the light, and this happens to strivers constantly.
And what should they do?
Here's the good news. There are two success curves. Now, early on, psychologists believed that there were two kinds of geniuses. There was the innovative genius, and there was the sort of the master teacher genius. There was the inventor, and there was the Dalai Lama. There was Elon Musk, and there was David McCullough. Those kinds of geniuses out there. One happened early, one happened late. It turns out that we all get those two curves. One is called fluid intelligence, in which your analytic capacity and innovative ability is really high. You can solve problems. You can be a cowboy intellectually. And the second curve happens much, much, much later, but largely due to the structure of the prefrontal cortex, as a matter of fact. And that is your wisdom, your ability to have a vast body of knowledge. You can't solve things as quickly as you did, but you know more.
You've lost your fastball.
You've lost your fastball, but you got a knuckleball, man. and you're able to assemble the ideas in novel and new ways and explain them more clearly. You can put together teams of people. You can teach better. You actually know the why of things as opposed to simply trying to figure out the what.
So you accept this transition and move to those new skills or those other kinds of skills.
Yes.
And then live your life according to those benefits.
Yes.
And I just wondered, it's a deeply personal book, and it's about one's own personal life. And so there isn't a lot of public policy in it.
Right.
But as I was reading it, I was wondering, were you secretly citing a message to President Biden and Senator McConnell and Senator Pelosi that they are in the wrong game? Our leaders are too old?
Well, I certainly was not sending a subtle message to President Dore.
Which I was also concerned about.
No, I understand. But it's worth pointing out that the big difference between the way that I and Robert acted as chief executive of this organization, I was trying to work on my fluid intelligence curve, and Robert is working masterfully on his crystallized intelligence curve. Yes. He's a coaching leader. That's something I didn't do very much. I kind of wish I had, but I was on the other curve. And so, in other words, and this is a case study, if we choose to accept it, and how you can do the same job
I wanted to talk about Pelosi,
on different
Biden,
curves.
And McConnell.
Let me stroke you a little more. Okay, so here's the question. Are they on the wrong curve? Are leaders?
Yeah.
It really depends on how you're trying to lead. And this is what I see in CEOs who are truly great. So leaders who are truly great, they start off as great fluid intelligence leaders, as innovators, as inspirational in the way that they're able to solve problems in new ways and inspire teams to do so. Later on, they're teachers, they're mentors. They're actually firing up people who are going to solve the problem. So the real question for us is, in our country or any country, are we electing leaders who are on the right curve? Now, you can always be a little too old for anything. So one of the things that we find with crystallized intelligence is that it starts screaming upward in your 50s and 60s. Ordinarily, it stays very high in your 70s as long as you've got your health. And your 80s, it really depends on your capacities. Most people actually don't have that, even a knuckleball in their 90s, to be sure. But it really depends on the diminishment of
But
your capacities.
a good example of that may be sort of Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos was clearly on the fluid intelligence for a long time.
Yeah.
He now is going around telling everybody he makes one decision a day.
Yeah.
Tries to do it before 10 o'clock. Much more of a mentor, sort of guide.
He cracked the code by accident. I mean, I assume by accident. My guess is he
it
hasn't.
looks that way. It
Yeah,
looks like
no,
he's
he really did a very good job.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I want to come back to this, but before we leave too far about, I just one little digression in the book. We're talking about the development of someone's life, their personal habits, their personal behaviors, and we're talking about a healthy life. You take a pause and you say, well, wait a minute, before I get too much further into this, I want to talk about the keys to remaining alive, the keys to remaining healthy. And here, after all this talk about the mind, and you do a lot on the body.
Right.
Could you just briefly, for the audience, because it is an important lesson, summarize the science on that?
Yeah, one of the things that, and I'm very influenced by the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is an 80-year longitudinal study that started with Harvard graduates in the late 1930s. And in the cohort, it was JFK and Ben Bradley and some very famous people. It was matched up with a cohort of people that were not just all, upper class white Harvard men. It was with another study that actually followed people who were not college graduates. And for an 80-year period, it looked at, what did they do earlier in their life and how did they wind up? It's a crystal ball. My students are intensely interested in this study.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay. And what they wanted was this quadrant. There's happy and unhappy, and there's well and unwell. You want the happy well. What did the happy well people do? And it turns out that happy and well, they're highly correlated. It's not like there are that many people who are super happy but unbelievably unhealthy. There's not that. There's a few, but not very many. The happy, well people did a combination of things that were obviously good for their happiness and their mental health, but obviously very good for their physical health, once again showing the axis that connects physical and mental health, the happiness and physical wellness.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these things they're kind of weirdly obvious. The people who tend to be happy and well later, they don't smoke or they quit. In my case, I quit. Yeah. When I was 26 years old, I still think about that every single day. That's a different issue.
Yeah.
They don't misuse alcohol, and alcohol is a very funny thing. The leader of this study, a guy named Robert Waldinger, who teaches at Harvard Medical School, he guest lectures for me, and he's weirdly specific about alcohol. And part of it is because, according to the OECD, the people who are most likely to abuse alcohol are high socioeconomic status men. So you think about people who get and misuse alcohol because they don't know and they're down and out and they're low education or low status and they feel bad about their lives. It's you. It's my students. It's my MBAs at the Harvard Business School. So woe be unto all of us if we're self-treating the anxiety that comes from high pressure lifestyles with the most available substance. People tend to self-treat. And so that's why it's a really important point. But it's also the point that people often think that because you have trouble in your relationships or your marriage is on the rocks, you drink more. No, your marriage is on the rocks because you drink too much. Actually, the causality almost universally goes in the wrong direction. So number 2 is drinking.
Don't smoke, don't drink.
Number 3 is actually exercising and diet. And that has to do with not doing faddish things and yo-yo diets and weird restrictions,
Just
et cetera.
walk.
And and for when it comes to exercise, the single best exercise that you can undertake for your mind and your body is lots and lots of walking. And it's like you'd go back to the ancient pilgrimages of the early church. Walk, 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 walk. Walk your way into health, mental health, into physical health. Those are the big 4. Yeah, those are the big 4.
Okay, so I wanted to get that out there because it's a very important part of the book and it's a fundamental truth. And I wanted especially my AEI working community people to hear it because I want you to be at your best.
Yeah, exactly
and
right.
live a long life.
By the way, I personally designed the gym in the basement of the American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah.
So,
See,
I'm not a micromanager, but I was on that because it's like
yes. And he used to open every major event where there was alcohol being served. He would make a kind of derisive joke about, okay, you got to listen to me before you really start drinking. And,
I know. That's right.
Isn't that correct? Am I right about that?
It's not my finest hour. It's like making fun of the donors because of how much they drink.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we'll turn back to the bigger issues. You have a whole section in the book about facing up to death.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about that. What's the key to becoming reconciled to death?
The section on death is called, contemplating your death. It's really about fear. And most of us, if I ask most people in America today, are you afraid of death? Most people actually aren't. Only about 20% of people are really afraid of death. The Denial of Death is a famous book by, an anthropologist named Ernest Becker, written in the 1960s, that everybody's terribly afraid of it. It's not true. But the reason I talk about the fear of death is because we all have our own version of the fear of death. We're all, I talk to my MBA students, they're afraid of failing. For them, success is life. And so therefore their fear of failure is a fear of death. For many, many people that I meet who are strivers in life, and striver doesn't mean rich, doesn't mean famous. Striver means trying to do a lot with your life, trying to live up to the max. They're really afraid of decline or irrelevance. That's a fear of death as well. The way to actually beat that is to, and fundamentally, it's worth pointing out that the ultimate negative emotion is fear. And the ultimate positive basic emotion, and this is a neuroscience principle, is love, not hatred. The way to neutralize fear is love in your life. And the best technique, actually, for understanding the fear of death is confronting it while contemplating the love that you have in your life, to confront the source of your fear. So there's a very famous meditation called the Maranasati meditation that Theravada Buddhists undertake. And you see, monasteries in Southeast Asia, and I've seen this in Thailand before, they'll have pictures on the walls of corpses in various states of decay. And it's just morbid until you understand that the monks are contemplating each one of these pictures every day, saying, that is me.
Yeah.
And that is me. Why? Because they're confronting it so it becomes ordinary. And so what I ask my students to do is to think about what you're most afraid of, and then put together your own Maranasati meditation and confront it in a spirit of love for the life that you have today.
So, the other quote you use it in a way to say this is not the way to face this is the Dylan Thomas poet quote about rage on against the dying light, right? Is that correct about that?
Yeah.
And that reminded me of my dad, who had a lot of love, and he confronted his fears.
Right.
But he didn't want to die. And the reason he didn't want to die was because he had no faith.
Oh.
And isn't there some role of faith in this? Isn't some acceptance of a higher being, God, a future salvation? Doesn't that play a role in facing death? Why didn't you mention that?
Well, I do in the next chapter after that. So it's called about walking a spiritual path, and this is what people who get from the first to the second curve and prosper.
Yeah.
It's one of the great habits of people who grow old well and happily, is that they're comfortable with the transcendental nature of life itself. And it's actually a very simple concept. Maybe it's the hand of God. Personally, I have traditional religious faith is literally the most important thing in my life, is my Catholic faith. And I recommend it to everybody. But what you find is that, as we say in my business, an empirical regularity is a sense of the transcendent is unreplaceable. There are basically 4 habits that people have that seem like they'll bring happiness and satisfaction and don't, which are money, power, pleasure, and fame. And there are 4 that do, which are faith, family, friendship, and work in which you earn your success. In other words, the mission of the American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah.
But again, I won't go there, I promise.
No, that's good. We like that.
This is the happiness
AEI.
think tank.
Yeah,
This is the Happiness Enterprise Institute.
That's
Anyway,
right.
the point of the first one is basically this. When people ask me about it, do I have to have traditional religious faith? The answer is no. But you need to understand what the Dalai Lama, in his several visits to the American Enterprise Institute, said to me, which is, don't forget that you are 1 in 7 billion, by which he didn't mean I'm an insignificant ant, but rather that there's a majesty if you can look at life at some remove. And furthermore, there's a peace that comes to you. Look, the problem with life is that left to your own devices, it's like watching the same television show over and over and over again, but obsessively. It's so my car, my job, my money, my friendships, my school. It's so boring. And yet we're so obsessed with it. Only the transcendental, whether it's Roman Catholicism or Buddhism or a meditation practice or the study of the ancient Stoics, even for an atheist, we must have this. And it's irreplaceable if you're going to grow old well and understand the context of your life.
So you have a whole section. You refer often to your Catholic faith, and you also refer to your affection for the Dalai Lama and Buddhism. And I just wondered for those of us who observed this during your tenure at AEI, and you don't address this explicitly in the book, how do they relate to each other? How can you be both?
One of the wonderful things when I was in the corner office here, your office, was the friendship and the mentorship that I got from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It was a wonderful relationship that I had that continues. He's been a guest speaker in my class at Harvard, as a matter of fact. And he made me better at my own faith. It's an incredible thing. And I asked him about that one time, and he said, oh, yes. He said, I meet Christians all the time. And they say, should I become a Buddhist? And I say, no, you should be a better Christian. I look, it's interesting, there's a meditative Catholic practice called the prayer of the Rosary, which I try to practice every day. Mm-hmm. I really learned the magic of praying my rosary when I was studying meditation practices with the Tibetan Buddhist monks at His Holiness's monastery in Dharamsala. I sat with the monks and prayed my rosary. And it was a real epiphany for me, as a matter of fact. There are many ways to learn the truth about your own life. There are many ways that you can have the truth revealed to you from truths that are adjacent to or parallel to and very many times different than your own tradition. That's the beauty, by the way, of real diversity. Forget the political nonsense that we're talking about all the time today. Let's talk about real diversity of different kinds of people with different experiences that can teach you new and wonderful things. So it's, the my teacher Sri Nochur Venkataraman in southern India, who helped me understand a lot of things about my life. I'm not a Hindu, and he doesn't think I'm a Hindu, but he truly, deeply had love for me and wants me to be better at who I am uniquely as a person. It's a cross-pollination of the universal love that can bless us all.
So, Arthur, I've greatly appreciate the wonderful back and forth we've had here in this conversation, as we always have, but I need to ask you a tough question.
Okay.
And that is, how do you react to someone who says that this book and this activity and this class and this column is all a retreat from the burdens of leadership in a troubled world? Have you escaped a world that you mentioned public policy is this political nonsense, but political nonsense has outcomes and consequences.
Sure.
What is your answer to that question, which you have to admit some people might ask?
Yeah. Well, to begin with, the political tensions run pretty high on college campuses. And suffice it to say, there are not that many people like me running around Harvard University. And so I've got to, I'm looking out over my shoulder a little bit. It felt like the American Enterprise Institute is a more relaxing environment for a guy like me than most college campuses. I get protested. It's like, who protests the happiness guy? But still, right? It's
at the business school?
No. When I go on, usually when I'm at liberal arts colleges where they have too much time on their hands. So chalk the sidewalk, go home climate denier. I've written 0 words in my career about the climate, but it doesn't matter really. It's all sort of by flavor at this point. It's tough times on college campuses, but I haven't stepped back and let's think a little bit about, what all of this represents. I started off by saying, look, there's a through line, a thread, as the Tibetan Buddhists say, a subtle wind that connects the happiness science with the ideology of the American Enterprise Institute to build a better world with happier people. What I want, fundamentally, what we need as a country through public policy and politics is to remember truly what makes this country unusual and great. And that is basically the idea that each one of us can live a life of dignity and lift other people up in dignity. There's no other place in the world. We've all been blessed to live in different countries and visit different places and talk to people from other regimes. There's no place like America where people think, I am the CEO of Me Inc., and that the enterprise of my life can be better in 10 years than it is today. It's a very unusual ideology. That requires a startup mentality. It requires a self-improvement mentality. That requires that we all master these ideas of understanding happiness and spreading it to other people. That's what this is. What I'm trying to do is to rebuild from the scientific foundations up what motivates and what the ideology of the American Enterprise Institute truly means. This is the bench science of AEI.
Yeah. So that's particularly good if it's effective, as it was and still is, from you to our community, our direct community, our employees, our scholars. Enormously a sort of effective education that you provided to all of us, and we benefited from. But you also took it on the road a little bit, and you had a sort of following on Capitol Hill. The Republican caucus, Republican members of the House of Representatives, the senators and people. And you bring that message of happiness and the road to happiness, the way to live a fulfilling life in an effort to make them better leaders. Is that what you just said?
That was truly one of my goals when I was president of AEI.
Did you, looking back now, do you think you had an effect on those people?
God, I have really thought about that deeply. And there were times when I felt frustration because there wasn't more movement. And politics is funny because, it goes forward and it goes backwards and you can't tell and you can't net out. You win some, you lose some, and sometimes you lose more than you win.
Yeah.
And I was asking one of our trustees, Kevin Rollins, who's the chairman of the board when I took over as president of AEI, about this. He said, I used to think about that when I was a missionary. He's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, AKA the Mormons. And he had a mission. He went on a mission when he was 19 years old. And he said, I'd knock on these doors and people would, nobody has ever said, great news, there's a Mormon missionary on the porch. Nobody's ever said those words in human history, right? And so there was a lot of rejection. And he said, but then he took the long view. What is the work of a missionary? The missionary's work might not be fulfilled in his or her lifetime.
It's
on the
a
contrary,
marathon, not a sprint.
Furthermore, you have to do what you can do, and you have to do what's right, and take joy in speaking the truth where there is not truth, to bring light where there's darkness.
Right.
And we're planting seeds. I mean, this is the American Enterprise Institute is planting seeds, and some of them are going to grow, and some of them aren't, and some of them are going to take a really long time, and sometimes it's going to take even beyond our career. But take joy in planting seeds instead of spraying Roundup all over the sort of the fields of ideology and stamping out happiness. Look, this is why it's really joyful, and this is what I'm doing today. I've got these kids, these 27, 28, 29-year-old people are going to run companies. Some of them are going to say, a place like AEI really is the public policy that I believe in because I studied happiness and make that through line. Some of them won't,
or some of them will take the lessons you've learned and just be better at what they do or what they apply themselves to.
If you don't take the long view, you will take the short-term perspective and your work simply won't be deep enough. And in the end, I look back on what I did and I look with admiration at what you're doing here. And I am proud to be part of an organization that is going to continue to be helping American public policy and make America a beacon of light and hope for the world in 100 years, including what we're doing right now.
And just to be clear, it's helping American public policy in a multifaceted way. I mean, not everyone does what you do here. Some other scholars focus on other things and advance a cause,
of course,
that's positive for the future of the country too.
When I was president, one time I was talking to a group of people that was doing work on bank deregulation. I said, who are you helping? I said, well, I don't know, regulators. Like, no. What is actually, who are the humans? And one of them said, a poor person who might be able to get credit and change her life. And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? There are lots and lots of ways to lift people up and bring them together.
Now, I've got one more question, and then I'm going to ask you a question about what did we miss and what should I have asked you, or what more do you want to say before we open it up to questions? But I wanted to tell the audience that I had this wonderful experience with this book. First of all, it's a beautiful book, and I open it up, and of course, there's a lovely blurb by the Dalai Lama, which was great. And you turn.
I wanted him to say it changed his life, and he didn't say that. In the blurb.
Well, it's. I'll come back to that because I want to talk about a dialogue I had with Sarah about it. But I'm coming along, and I get to the dedication. It says, "To my guru," and of course, as an AEI cynic I am, I said, "Oh my God, he dedicated to the Dalai Lama." But you have to read the book to know that no, he dedicated to Esther, who of course is a great friend of ours and Arthur's wonderful wife. And I wondered if you'd just tell us about Esther and why you dedicated to her, and what the role of a marriage like yours is in your path to happiness. That's a lot.
No, it's a lot. It's a lot. One of the great secrets to happiness, of course, is a lifelong romantic partnership, which has its ups and downs, but in which the dedication that you bring to it is a model of the love that you're trying to bring to the whole world. It's a refraction, it's agape, it's this cosmic love that can actually be, from God, and that you can share with others. It bounces off of you to your spouse. I mean, there's a lot of theology and philosophy about this, but practically speaking, what does it mean? When I was here running AEI, there was a lot of hard days. It's a grind.
Long days,
but also scary days and stressful days. And when I would go home to my house in Bethesda, and I would talk to Esther, inevitably on my worst days, she would bring it back to the cosmic things. She would bring it back to the fundamental things, to the transcendental things. And it was through the hard times that I had with the hand of my wife, who leads me on paths of righteousness, who helped me to understand the role of faith in my life through the experiences that were difficult, not the jubilant times, not with the $20 million contribution or the naming gift, whatever it happens to be.
The building.
The Dracula's castle. Don't call it that. So
Did you say that?
I didn't say that. No, you said that. I don't know.
it
Just
wasn't
slipped
me.
out anyway.
I assure you.
But it was during those difficult times that I actually understood a lot of the real deep meaning of my life. And I was describing that to a Hindu teacher that I had in the southern India, a Tamil guy, where Saranandume and I were visiting. And it was this wonderful experience that we're having. And he's asking me about my wife and how she leads me on the paths of righteousness. And he listened and he said, she's your guru. And she is.
So Sarah and I were talking about the book, and she has not read it, but I was telling her about the two curves. You know, the first, the striver and the leader and the guider, and then a new part in life when you reach a certain age where you take that step back and add the sort of wisdom and the longer term perspective. And she said that that's also the story of parenting.
Yeah.
And it's a transition that we're going through, you know, especially Sarah, who, you know, managed our home and our 4 children. You know, she was very involved in every little detail and managing and leading and guiding. And now as we have adult children, she's had to learn that she can't do that anymore. And she has to jump the curve. And so maybe that's not the lesson you would want us to learn from it, take from your book, but that is part of the story of the transitions in life. You need to see where you are and how you need to adjust to live a more fulfilling life. It's a beautiful book.
I mean, parenting is very much about fluid intelligence, and grandparenting is very much about crystallized intelligence.
There you go. That was
and
what I was trying
I can
to
only
say,
hope that
but couldn't say.
10 years from now, I mean, one of my great ambitions is to be dandling my 11th grandchild on my knee.
11th.
Well, I hope so. I mean, we're very Catholic, and you know, it's like I just hope that my kids have openness to life, as shall we say, euphemistically.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So we've had a good talk, Arthur. And what did I miss? What would you like to say that you haven't said about your book, about the experience of writing the book, about where you are, what you want to achieve with this new chapter in your life?
It's a privilege to be able to talk about ideas. It's a privilege to be able to talk about ideas that can actually help people in their lives. There are very, very few privileges like that. And to have worked here with my great intellectual heroes, and then to do a little bit of the bench science of the happiness that undergirds the ideology of this institution is just a huge thrill. And for that, I'm grateful for the place that in most positive ways in my life made me the man that I am. And that's to
and you still are an AEI scholar.
I'm still an AEI scholar, but I'm mostly an AEI admirer, and I will be for the rest of my life. Thank you.
That's very nice. Thank you, Arthur, for being here. Now, I'm supposed to take questions from the audience that people are going to give me, but I don't see them coming in my direction. So do I have some questions from the audience? So here we do. We have some. Okay. So let's talk about loneliness. Why has that the problem of loneliness seemed to get worse? And you know, it may relate to what we've been through under COVID. Is there an individual solution to loneliness that you recommend?
So it's true that loneliness has gotten worse during COVID. We have a wonderful Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, for President Biden, who is also the Surgeon General for President Obama, and he's exactly what you want in a Surgeon General. I mean, he's not on TV every single day, and he's actually working for public health, and he's humble. And I asked him, he was on my podcast, and I said, what's the biggest public health crisis? The obvious answer is COVID-19, right? I don't know, why do I have to put the number at the end? COVID-19 is not COVID-18. I don't know. Anyway, so he said, not COVID-19. He didn't say the opioid epidemic. He said loneliness. And he looked at the statistics about how bad it is, how it's been getting worse, and then how it has skyrocketed during the coronavirus epidemic. And it's a very interesting thing, because when you look at the data, they are extremely alarming, and how they really have blown up during the lockdowns and you know, the aftermath of what we have all dealt with.
Right.
So the question really is, what should people do about that? And so the answer to this, or practically any other problem when it comes to happiness or many things in life, is the answer is more love. Now, there's the neurophysiological basis for this. I mean, I talk an awful lot in my lectures about a neuropeptide that functions as a hormone in the brain called oxytocin, which is stimulated on the basis of eye contact and touch. And how one of the reasons that loneliness has gotten so much worse is because of a scarcity of oxytocin that we've tried to redress just intuitively by going to social media, which gives us no oxytocin because there's no eye contact and there's no touch. It just feels like human interaction. It's basically trying to satiate your hunger with burgers and fries.
Right.
And it is metabolically problematic. It doesn't actually give you the nutrients that you need. And so it leaves you hungrier and it's harmful for your health. That's what social media does. And so I talk about some very technical solutions to that. But like anything else, the solution to that is actually more meaningful human contact. So in the context of this book, I talked to I've interviewed dozens of people in this book who are surrounded by people all day long and they're hopelessly lonely. People my age, your age, lonely, leaders of organizations. And leaders are some of the loneliest people around. And the reason for this is not because they don't have friends. They have tons of friends. They have deal friends and they don't have real friends. Now, people in leadership roles and strivers in general, they get really, really good at their connections. They get really good at their Rolodex. They get really good at creating real deal friends, which Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics talked about the friends of transaction, right? It was the lowest level of friendship. We all have them. It's fine. But you got to get to the perfect friendship, which is a friendship of virtue, which shared love for meaningful things. The people you'd call at 2 a.m. in a panic if it's necessary. And so I make my students make an inventory of their 10 closest friends. And then based on a series of criteria, write deal or real after each one of them. And if fewer than 4 are real friends, it's time to do some work.
Okay, so I'm glad this came up because this is a little bit of a crisis in the work environment world now.
Right.
Because we really are being encouraged not to establish real friends in the workplace because it comes with all kinds of potential problems and issues.
Right.
And so how are you telling them to ignore those cautionary instructions and don't let that those concerns, and you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know.
Right?
I mean, it's like, look, oxytocin comes from, physical contact.
Yeah,
which
you just said it, right?
It has some. It's like,
God, you can't do that.
Use it wisely.
And so, one could instruct a leader today at Harvard Business School, given the litigation world and the Me Too movement. One thing you want to do is not make friends with anybody.
Yeah.
So how are you? What's the answer on that?
It's bad advice. It's simply bad advice. It's like it's an over litigious environment that is actually too risk averse and it's hurting humans. Is the bottom line. Now, of course, we need rules, we need proper protocols, and we need obvious sense of what's appropriate in the workplace. But these are not incompatible. This is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I just made that up. So, and you can't. It doesn't make sense to actually do something that wipes out human contact because we're so worried about the inappropriate human contact. You take the problem on the merits of the problem. Right. And the side angle on this, by the way, is that we're not coming back to work in a lot of places in the economy. My students are taking jobs where they don't live in the place because they only have to be at their office 1 day a month or something. This is a catastrophic mistake. Now, a lot of people, the first fundamental rule of HR physics is that employees at home want to stay at home, right? But there's a problem with this, which is the executive function of the brain is impeded by loneliness. Your feelings you impede your ability to make the right decisions for your own happiness when you're really lonely. I'm really lonely, so I'm going to cocoon alone and open Haagen-Dazs and watch Netflix. The right thing to do when you're lonely is to call a friend. The right thing to do when you're lonely is to go outside and get some sunshine, to ride your bike, is to be around people, to get out of your house where you're alone under the circumstances. There's a mental health wave crisis coming at America right now because of our inability to actually do what we need and for leadership to say, we're going back to work.
So I'm with you 100% on that. And the other question that's in this list of questions is about intergenerational relationships, which are even more apparently fraught. And there's a question is, and you would push back against that too, that it's important for younger people to get the benefits of friendship and mentorship from older people, right?
Yeah, totally. And so it's a huge mistake, and it's a weirdly ahistoric thing that we've done, where our friends are largely our own age. And the reason is because we're segregated starting in kindergarten and going up, and we're only around people our own age, and we think we can only relate to people who are our own age. but that's wrong. I mean, that's a really big mistake, because people on their fluid intelligence curve, they need people on their crystallized intelligence curve. And actually seeing this, I mean, that's real diversity. When I was giving a talk when I was president of AEI at a tech firm in Northern California, and somebody asked me a question about diversity, about gender and racial diversity among engineers, and that's it's a big issue. I think it's important, and I talked about it. But then I said, speaking of diversity, how many old people work here? And they're like, what do you mean, over 30? Punk. And so, no.
That's not a term we approve of here at AEI.
Yeah.
One
of the problems that we have in business today and in government today is an inability for people to integrate across age groups to get different experiences. And one of the biggest problems in the tech sector, by the way, which has gone from the most respected part of American entrepreneurial economics to one of the least, to be seen as scary and as dangerous and as selfish, is because of a lack of old people in the C-suite. I mean, you look at the social media companies, they're making mistakes that no 70-year-old would make. And this is a point. So one of the big movements, I mean, we've got Steve Case here, who's like a movement guy. Yeah. By the way, perfect example of starting AOL on the fluid intelligence curve.
Yeah, I was going to say
now actually doing pure crystallized intelligence by bringing ideas together in new ways.
But you didn't lose your fastball.
Yeah. Well, this is really important, because this is the kind of thinking, Steve's got the kind of thinking that we need in the C-suite of the tech firms. Yeah. Right. And you're probably not old enough yet. I mean, the point is, we need over 70 people that have been in the school of hard knocks. Okay. So I want to start a movement.
I just want to, because you are at Harvard Business School and you've raised this issue of intergenerational relationships. So are you having to go to sort of HR program seminars about relationships between professors and students? And you have graduate students.
Yeah.
And are you getting lessons now, given the environment we live in, that you reject or push back against, or is it irrelevant at Harvard? What's the deal there?
I haven't, mostly I just don't go to the meetings, but I think it's actually completely inappropriate that professors date students. Well, that's a kind of a layup as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I don't need a seminar to tell me that I shouldn't, be disloyal to my wife and date a student. I mean, it's like, newsflash, right? That's evil. Yeah. Right. But those are just my morals under the circumstances, but also it's the fast road to unhappiness. And so there's a lot of that. But one of the things that I do talk about is the importance that all of my students have much older friends, but real friendships. And I've done that myself. I mean, I pal around with Tully Friedman. We went to India together. We went to Japan together. We went to Barcelona together. We travel together. We hang out. I love Dan Daniello, not as the guy whose name is on the building, but as my friend. He's a person. And so I've actually adopted intergenerational friendships, and I've gotten much smarter as a result of it, because everything they say is like totally crystallized. It's amazing. They've helped me up my crystallized intelligence curve.
Thank you very much, Arthur, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. This has been a nice conversation, a lovely conversation. It's a great book. It really is. It's a very personal book, and it's very helpful. So I encourage everyone to go out and buy it and read it.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks to all of you.